All right, good evening. We are on Daf Yud Aleph. Amud Aleph towards the middle of the page. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down from where it gets wide. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa is going to tell us how to do kmitza. Rav Papa says, Amar Rav Papa, pshitali, it is simple to me that malo kumtso. Now the pasuk says that you're supposed to take your full kometz, kidekamti inshi. It's supposed to be done the normal way that a person scoops something up. The normal way a person scoops something up is he comes in and scoops it up like so. Chop, karate chop, right? From the side. Boy, Rav Papa. So Rav Papa asked the question, Kamat beroshe be'osav, my, what would be if he sticks his fingers into the kmitza, like so. He puts his hand on top of the kmitza and squishes it like that. What is that good? What about minhat dodin? That is, he sticks his hand on the back and he kind of like pushes his hand down into the.
That Russell did with the ice.
Does he do that? Yeah, he does that, right? So yes, in the back on the hand. Maya mimata lemala. What if he goes from the bottom of his hand upwards? He scoops from the top like this, scoops in like that. What about those? So in that circumstance, he says teku. That is not clear, right? So we're not quite sure whether that would work or it doesn't. Amar of Papa says, pshitali. It seems simple to me that in the service Melo Chafnov on Yom Kippur, the Kohen has got to scoop into Ketores and he's got to get 2 handfuls. What's the right way? It says Melo Chafnov, his 2 handfuls. Kidechafni inshi, the normal way that people do a scoop. From the side, they take their hands and they scoop it up like that, right? But, boy, Rav Papa wants to know, Chavatz beroshe etz be'osav. What if you do it this way and you scoop it up like that? Is that good? What about minat stodin, that he shoves the back of his hand in and shakes it up there?
If you're scooping up like this, right? If you're scooping up like this, right? Then scooping up, you're tilting your hand, the thing will fall off.
You'd think that's right, yeah. So it's going to be, but let's say you somehow were able to do it in such a way that it doesn't fall out, right? Is the issue is that maybe that is the issue. Maybe that's exactly the point. Still not going to fill it up properly, right? So what would be the case there? Chafan bezu u bezu. V'karvan lo etzel zu. What if he sticks one hand in, scoops it up, sticks the other hand, scoops it up, and then brings them together? Now he's got 2 handfuls. What about that? So teku. So that we're not sure of again. So the right way to do it is squish like that. Boy, Rav Papa. Rav Papa wants to know. Dabke lekometz bedofne demano. You've done your kmitza, and you stick this bread, right? A little bit, maybe it's got a little bit stickiness to it. Maybe it's got some oil on it for adhesion. And he sticks it to the side of the utensil. Mahu, why? What will be the halacha? Toch kli ba'inon, we need that the kmitza has to be placed into a second utensil, veha ika, and it is. It's inside the next utensil. Odilma, hanacha besocha ba'inon, it needs to be placed into the bottom of the utensil. Velakan has not been. So teku, not sure about that one. Boi, Mar Barav Ashi, so Mar Barav Ashi asked the question, Havche lemana v'dabke lekoma be'ar isa demana. Let's say you take the bowl and you hold it upside down, and you take the kmitza and you stick it into the bottom of the utensil.
Is the kmitza sticky or not sticky?
It has to be sticky enough, otherwise it'll fall right out, right? So it's got to be some kind of it's got to be
whatever.
Well, it's going to have it's going to be covered with oil and such, right? So it's going to be some kind of mush. So what will be the halacha there? Hanacha besocha ba'inon ve'ha'ika, right? If he needs to be lying on the bottom of the utensil, and it is, odilma ketikuno ba'inon veleka, or it needs to be resting in the bottom like a normal way, and that it is not. So teku, so we leave that unresolved as well. Now we move on to the next Mishnah. Ketzad hu osa. How do you do the service of the kmitza? Poshet es etzbosav al pas yado. You're going to spread your fingers across the palm of your hand, right? Like so. Riba shamna. Let's say he's got, if you've got too much oil, chiser shmana. Shamna, if you've got too little oil, chiser levona, so you've got too little of the levona, psula, so that is going to be puzzle. Okay, so now, says the Gemara, Heichi dami riba shamna. What does that mean? You've got too much oil. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, you put too much oil into the container. As we see in the back of the art scroll, there's a prescribed amount of oil for every amount of flour that is brought. So, for example, right, tells us that if you're going to bring 1 isaron, you're supposed to bring 1 log of oil. That goes with it. That's not this one, right? Half a lin is 3 log. That's for the guilt offering. So these are going to be, the amounts are going to bring an isaron. We're going to bring 1 log of oil. Where does it tell us that? The animal ones are different sizes, but I don't see it here. Here no, this one is half an isaron, half an isaron.
Look.
No, the Beis HaMikdash book is only geography. Does not have those things. Okay, but there's a log of oil. Here it is. Service for obligatory meal offerings. 1 isaron, 1 log of oil, 1 kometz, 3 fingers full of frankincense. Okay, so this is how, that is the stated amounts. So now, let's say, oh, thank you. Let's say a person doubled that. And by doing so, he has created an additional sanctification of oil. Now, if he only adds half a lug, so that's not going to be a significant amount to sanctify, because we don't sanctify anything in volumes of less than a whole. So therefore, it's not going to be sanctified. Now, why v'lok mei kigon de'arev ba shemen dechulin? Why don't we talk about, why do we have to have that the additional oil be sanctified in order for it to be excess? Why wouldn't it be excess even if you took non-sanctified oil, right? If I've got extra and I put in a little bit shemen dechaverta, or what happens if it's oil from another korban? This oil was a lug, it was attached to that korban, and I took some of that and I brought it over here. So now I am bringing invalid oil and I am creating too much oil in the sacrifice. That should be no good. Maybe you'll say shemen dechulin v'shemen dechaverta lo pasol. If you're going to tell me the reason why the Mishnah doesn't give that example is because it's not going to invalidate it. But that's not true, because it says, so if that's case, minchas chote de pasol b'shemen hechi mishkachas la. So what would be a circumstance then how you could possibly get a minchas chote that would become invalid in a circumstance where you would add oil? Because idida, if your issue is that if you are only going to ruin something by adding extra oil of its own, halesla, we said that the chatos minchas chote has no oil, so therefore there is no such thing as adding too much of its own oil. Idechulin udechaverta hamart lo pasal. And if you are suggesting that oil that came from non-sanctified sources or even from a different korban wouldn't invalidate the offering, there would be no circumstance where oil would invalidate such an offering. So rather, since we know that a minchas chote can't have any oil, and if it has any oil, it's invalid, we must derive from that the oil must invalidate even if it comes from other sources. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Elazar, lo mi boy kamar. Rabbi Elazar says, it's a circumstance where we say, I don't even need to say that, meaning I'm going to go even further. Lo mi boy chulin v'dechaverta de pasil. What the Mishnah is saying is, for sure, if I add extra oil from unsanctified sources or from another korban, that's going to ruin the offering. Aval hifresh lo shnei lugin hoil v'hai chazila ema lo lifsol. If I were to double the amount of oil for this sacrifice, since either part of this double portion would be effective if I only used half of it, so I might think the double portion itself is still effective, kamash and therefore it's telling me no. Once it's too much, it's too much. And so therefore in all cases, it is going to invalidate. Umina lay Rabbi Elazar ha. Where do we see? How does Rabbi Elazar know that? After all, we've got a perfectly logical reason to say that it's not invalid with extra oil. So Amar Rava says, Masnisin kishi say. The Mishnah is bothering him. My area detani, what does it mean when the Mishnah says riba shamna? Its oil is too much. Lesne riba lo shemen. All the Mishnah had to say was, it has extra oil. Then we would know the oil could come from additional sources. Its oil implies that it can be invalidated by extra oil even within its own offering.
Which oil were they using? Like olive oil?
They were always using olive oil, yeah. Ella hakamash moan. This is coming to tell us da'af al gav dehifresh lo shnei lugin. Even if you are going to double, if you put in too much oil, even for the sake of that sacrifice, it's going to invalidate it. Next thing that we said, chiser levon nasa. If it's missing some of the frankincense, how much frankincense do you need in it, and what is missing? Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned in a brisa, chaser ve'amda al koret echad. Let's say the levon is missing. All it has is one piece. One piece, right? So we're discuss how much is one piece, right? Because a piece is a ill-described quantity. So Some meforshim say a korate is I guess like the this would come like it's a, I don't know how it grows, but it's a plant. So it grows frankincense. It grows like a plant, and so therefore it has some kind of the berry itself or shape. So it's one piece of that. And the other says no, it's whatever it was ground up into, whatever the acceptable piece of that size was. So all you need is one piece.
Is it like a Boswellia sacra?
That I would not know. Could be. I don't know the scientific name for the frankincense. So, okay. So, if it's missing, all you've got is one piece. So then the mincha is pasula. Al shnei karotin kshir. But if you've got two pieces, it's kosher. Div Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Shimon says, Al karet echad kshir. Even one piece is still kosher. Pach mikam pasula. Less than a piece, you've got half a piece or whatever. Then it becomes pasul. Yud aleph amud beis. V'atanya, we learned in a brisa. Kometz ulevona shechaser kol shehu. If the kemitza and the levona are missing any amount, so then the mincha kol shehu, it's pasul, it's invalid. So you said that it's not missing any. If it's missing any levona, it's got to be all the way down to the littlest bit. So tni, the way we have to learn it is koret levona shechaser kol shehu pasul. What we mean is, if the one piece of levona that's necessary is missing any amount, then it is going to be invalid. Okay. Or else, if you want, I can answer. It depends, right? Well, we're talking about a piece. That's talking about if we're bringing frankincense together with another korban mincha, then it's a portion of that korban mincha, and all I need is a piece. However, if it's levona that's coming by itself, somebody donates and says, I want my offering to be levona. That's what he's donating. So then he's got to bring a kmitza. He's got to bring a kometz of levona, a fistful of levona. And so therefore, if he's missing even a little bit of that donation, so then it's going to be invalid.
What is levona again?
Frankincense. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef says in Rabbi Yochanan, Sholosh machlokas badavar. There are three opinions as far as this consideration, as far as how much is missing in levona. We've mentioned two, but Rabbi Meir says kometz batchila vekometz basof. In order to get your offering started, you've got to put your kmitza in at the beginning, all 3 fingers full, and you're going to then have that much at the end. You can't be missing any. And Rabbi Yehuda says, kometz batchila u'shnei krotim basof. You need to have a kmitza at the beginning, but as he said, you just need to have 2 pieces by the end. And Shimon holds kometz batchila v'koret echad basof. You need the kmitza at the beginning and 1 piece at the end. All 3 of them are learning the same pasuk. They're just interpreting the pasuk differently. As pasuk says in Vayikra Perak Vav pasuk Ches, v'eis kol halavona asher al hamincha. All of the levona that was on the mincha. Meir Savar. Meir holds that. That means ad de'is levona deikba'a b'hadi mincha meikara. It has to be all of the levona. You need all of the levona that you put on at the beginning has to continue to be there. Rabbi Yehuda Savar. Rabbi Yehuda says, call. All of it means that you can't lose all of it, meaning as long as you got 1 piece, you're okay. And ace, then the word ace means l'rabos koret acher. Then it says koret. It says the whole pasuk was the ace kol levona asher al mincha, all of the levona that is on it. So the ace and kol, each one represents 1 piece, which means you need 2 pieces. And Rabbi Shimon, the ace lo dorish. Rabbi Shimon does not think the word ace means anything extra. Therefore, it's kol. You just need to have 1 piece. Okay, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef says in Rabbi Yochanan, machlokas belevona ha'ba'im mincha. This machlokas is talking about what happens when you have the frankincense that comes together with a regular mincha offering of belevona ha'ba b'fnei atzma. However, in a circumstance where, as we said, this was a levona sacrifice, somebody donated levona. Everyone agrees that the kmitza has to be the offering, and that's the kmitza is what the offering is. Ula hachi itzrich. That's what the pasuk says. Asher al hamincha. The pasuk says that this is a limitation that this missing amount is acceptable. It has to be that is talking about the circumstance where it is the levona, the frankincense, that comes on the mincha. This limiting requirement, or limiting of the requirement of having the entire kmitza, is on a circumstance where the levona, where the frankincense, is coming together with the mincha. But if the frankincense is coming by itself, you cannot lose any of it. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef says in the Rabbi Yochanan, machlokas belevona haba im mincha. He says no, the other way. The machlokas is he says that it's a machlokas in the levona that comes together with the mincha. He says a different thing. If the levona is coming with the scoops, the spoons that are from the shulchan that we described when we had the lechem upon him, we've got those spoons that have incense in them. Everyone agrees you need to have 2 kmitzos in those spoons, right? That for sure, you can't be missing anything. But chila at the beginning, ushnei kmatzim basofa, you need to have 2 at the end. Pshita. I mean,
if one of those spoons break, how do you fix it? How do you replace it?
I'm sorry, what?
If one of those spoons break, how do they?
Oh well, then yeah, then then you've got a kmitza chasera. Then you've got a missing kmitza. Now it's puzzle.
How do you get another one though?
Well, you're going to start over.
Rebuild it from scratch, basically.
Yeah, you got to bring more kmitza. You got to get more levona, right? So it's pshita. I mean, you just told me that I need to. It's an independent. Basically, it's frankincense. It's not mixed together with anything. Of course, you've got to have the whole thing. No, not necessarily, because Tim, what would you have thought? Kevon dibahadi lechem asya. This frankincense is coming together as part of a mincha offering, which includes the lechem upon him, the showbread. Ka'asher al mincha damya. Therefore, it's similar, as the pasuk said, to a circumstance where it's a levona offering that comes together with a mincha. So kamash malan, no, that is not the case. Even though it's true, the bazichin, the containers, these spoons that have the levona in them, are in fact part of a korban, which is a mincha including bread. Nevertheless, these spoons contain the frankincense independent of the bread. They're not mixed together in a utensil in any way. Therefore, they're considered an independent levona offering, and you cannot lose any of it. Pligi bo Rav Ami v'Rav Yitzchak nafcha. However, that actually is an argument, right? This issue of whether you can be missing any of the kmitza of the frankincense is an argument between Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak nafcha. One said, like we had suggested up until this point, that the argument about how much of the levona needs to be left is talking about when you bring levona together with another korban mincha. But if you're talking about an offering that you're bringing the kmitza only, that is the only part of the offering. The offering is only levona, so you need your kmitza at the beginning and your kmitza at the end. The other one says no, machlokas bazu, kach machlokas bazu. It's an argument either way, and we end that there. Next part of the Mishnah says chisar levona sa. If any of the levona is missing, it's psula. So it seems that if it's missing, so then it's pasul, which means hayasir kshera. If you've got extra levona, then the offering's still okay. Vihatanya, but we're in a brisa not like that. Yasir psula. We have a brisa says that if you have too much, it's extra. So how are you going to explain? Why does the Mishnah mention that? Amar Rami Bar Chama says, Kegon shehifrish lo shnei kimatzin. What happens is, he separates out 2 kmitzim of levona. And what he does is, he's bringing too much. He's supposed to have 1 kmitza, and he brings 2. So now, since he is adding on an entirely second amount, so that is going to make it puzzle. But that which our Mishnah was talking about, where if you have a little bit extra, it's okay, that's where you're adding on only a little bit. And that's similar to what we said by the oil, right? Like we said by the oil of the lug, of the oil, we said that the only way to invalidate your offering with extra oil is for us to actually add an entire extra lug. Adding a little bit extra oil is not going to invalidate it. And that's the same thing here with the levona. Adding a little bit extra is not going to invalidate it, but adding an entire extra kmitza is. V'amar Rami Bar Chama says, Hifrish lo shnei kmatzin. Let's say for your mincha, you separated out two kmitzos, two of them, or kmitzin. Ve'avad echad mehen kodem kmitza, and you lose one of them before you have to do the kmitza on the sacrifice itself, right? So you're going to scoop from the flour. Before you do that, you lose one of the handfuls of levona. Velo hukba'u achar kmitza. Lo hukba'u. So since this got lost before you did the kmitza, then it's okay, because what happens, basically, kmitza is the moment at which the offering becomes activated. So if you only have...
If you take some of it, how can you lose? How's it okay to lose? You lose some of the kmitza, how's it okay?
Because you had extra, right? You were only supposed to bring one kmitza, and you brought two. And so therefore, if you lost one, you're down to one left, that's the right amount. So then your offering is good. Achar kmitza, if, however, you had two fistfuls in, and now you do your kmitza on your korban, now your korban is puzzle. Because at kmitza, even though you lost it later, at kmitza, your offering was no good. It had too much levona in it. The Amar Rami Bar Chama says, Hifresh arba kmatzin, lishnei bazichin. Let's say a person is doing the service for the shulchan, and instead of bringing two spoonfuls, which is what he's supposed to do, he brings four. But he loses two. Kodem siluk bazichin, before he's supposed to on Friday go in there and remove the spoons. So lo hukbu, then you're fine. You lost two of them. Doesn't make a difference. Liachar siluk bazichin, but if you took the frankincense off the table at that point, and now you've got all four, so then hukbu, they're established, and now you've invalidated your showbread. Ha-tu-lamali, why do I need both those cases? I mean, it's the same thing. I get it. Once you're adding on extra frankincense, then it matters when you do the kmitza part. So the answer is, it's the same thing. So Ma'adatim, what would you have thought? Kevin debara kometz dida. Since when it comes to the lechem apanim, each kmitza is its own spoon. So therefore, kevin shegias mana leforka keman deprika damya. So therefore, as we had suggested before, even before you remove it from the table, it should be considered as though it's already removed, because it's already in a separate, already existing utensil. So therefore, if I ever have more than the right amount of frankincense on the table, despite the fact that I haven't yet removed it, since the time has arrived for me to remove it, it may be considered as though it's already removed, and therefore invalidate the lechem hapanim. Therefore, kamash malan, no, that it's the moment at which you remove the spoons from the table that establishes the sacrifice, and it's not until that point do we measure how much levona you actually have on the table. So if you lost your excess levona before that, then you're okay. Okay, next Mishnah. Let's talk about pigul, right? We're moving forward in parallel to our things that we learned from Menachos Vachim. We remember that pigul is having a illegal intent during a matir, during a service which permits a later activity in the service. Right? So kmitza is a permitting service that allows us to burn the kmitza on the mizbeach later. Burning the kmitza on the mizbeach is a permitting service which allows the consumption of the shirayim. So, any of the services, so if you have a wrong intent during any of the services, any of the essential services,
like Aaron's son going to kosher kedashim,
that is more severe than pigul, right? That was taking an offering that they shouldn't, in a location they should never have been in. But this is more like, I'm doing my regular korban mincha, but I have in mind that I'm going to eat it outside of the right place or the right time. So, here's the cases. The Kohen is doing kmitza on this mincha offering, and he thinks to himself, the leftovers that are in this container, which the Kohen is allowed to eat, so I'm going to eat it outside of the courtyard. So, lecho kazayas mishiareh b'chutz. Or, not I'm going to eat the whole thing. All I want to do is eat a kazayas of it outside. Lahaktir kumtza b'chutz. Or, he says, I am going to burn some of it outside of these. We said that shchute chutz, you cannot burn an offering, tarz chutz, sorry.
If you use it as a bread, you have to wash. So kazayas is like it's a nice amount for it to be.
This is, and generally speaking, a kazayas is the shear for any eating of something, right? So whenever we have an halacha that a item that you have to either have a mitzvah to eat or a prohibition not to eat, kazayas is generally the amount. Yom Kippur being an exception, where we have Milo Lugmov, and we can discuss when we get to Masechus Yoma, right? But generally speaking, because that's a issue of inui, of affliction, more than it's an issue of consumption of eating. So when you eat matzah, you got to eat a kazayas. When you are not allowed to eat outside of the azara, a kazayas is the amount that you cannot eat. Unless you're Rabbi Eliezer, of course, which we'll bring him up later on today. Then according to him, you're only liable if you eat the entire thing, because it's all or nothing for him. It's all one unit. So now, kazayas kumtza b'chutz, or he's going to consume, he's going to burn a kazayas of the kometz outside. Lahaktir levona b'chutz, or he intends to burn the levona outside. Now here we don't say a kemitza of it because, or a kazayas of it, because it's not relevant. The kazayas, as we said, the shear for levona for frankincense is even a smaller amount. Even small parts are going to invalidate. So it's possible in that circumstance, having in mind to do the service outside of the proper place, even if you didn't actually do it outside the proper place, having in mind you're going to do the service outside the proper place invalidates the offering. It's a puzzle, but it doesn't make you liable to kares because it's not pigul. Pigul is when you have in mind that you're going to do it outside of the proper time. Proper place is only puzzle. It's not kares. Ve'imbo kares. Continuing on, lechol shiarel lamachar. If, however, the kohen does his kemitza and he thinks, I'm going to eat the leftover bread tomorrow, and you can't do that because the mincha, you have one night, and we have one day and one night to eat it.
If you're saying if you do a carbon and it does over, you have to eat it the same night. You can't just leave it over for the next day.
Correct. That becomes, what do you call that? We call it lun, and it becomes nosar, right? Yeah. That's our problem. But you have in mind you're going to do that. Kazayas mishiarelamachar, or I'm going to take a kazayas of it, not the entire thing. Lahaktir komtza, I'm going to burn the kmitza from this offering, lamachar tomorrow. Kazayas mikum lamachar, or I'm going to do a kazayas of my kmitza. Lahaktir levona salamachar, I'm going to burn the levona of the offering tomorrow. That is pigul. That is the definition of pigul, outside of the right time. And v'chayavan alayha kores, if the person eats this now, then he is going to be liable for kores. Okay. Zeklal. Here's the rule. Kol hakometz on nosein bakli. Anything that is the kemitza, or if he does the service of putting the kemitza into a utensil, ha-molich, if he's going to carry this kemitza towards the mizbeach, ha-maktir, he's going to burn this kemitza on the mizbeach, le'echol davar shedarko le'echol, and he's going to consume, he has in mind that he's going to eat a portion of the sacrifice, which is edible, like the leftover bread, ulahaktir davar shedarko le'achtir, or to burn something which is supposed to be burned, like the kemitza, chutz lemekomo, and he has in mind that he's going to do it outside of the right place, pasol vein bokaris, it invalidates the sacrifice, but the person who consumes that food is not chayav kares. It's all I say. Chutz lezmano, but if he has in mind that he's going to do this outside of the right time, then it's pigul v'chayav of kares. Now it becomes pigul, and if you do that, you are going to be liable for kares. Ubilvad sheyakriv hamatir kemitzvaso. However, you have to have brought the rest of the service according to the proper procedures, right? For example, if you throw the kemitza away, you burn the kemitza, you don't actually bring it on the mizbeach. So if that happens, you haven't finished the sacrifice, you have not created pigul. The pigul is if the offering is 100% fine, except for this one intent that you're going to consume it outside of the proper time. Ketzad karev hamatir k'mitzvaso. So let's get specific. What do we mean when we say that the permitters have to be brought properly? So, for example, kamatz b'shtika, the kohen does kmitza and he doesn't say a word. He doesn't think to mess it up. Nasan b'kliva holich v'hiktir chutz lizmano. But then he thinks to himself, as he's putting the kmitza into a utensil and he's carrying it and he's burning it on the mizbeach, that he's going to consume the leftovers outside of the right time. Oshakamatz, or he does it the other way. Oshakamatz chutz lizmano, he does his kmitza with in mind that he's going to consume it outside of the right time. V'nasan b'kliva holich v'hiktir b'shtika, and he does put it in utensil and bring it to the mizbeach and burn it on the mizbeach without saying anything. And he does that properly. So either he started off messing it up, or he started off fine and later messed it up. Either way, shekamatz v'nasan. So in those cases, zehu shekarav hamatrik mitzvah. So that is what we mean by bringing the korban properly, and you're going to be chayav pigul if you consume the leftover breads. Keita lo karav hamatchik mitzvah. What is an example when we mean when we say that you didn't bring it properly? So, for example, chutz l'mekomo, you start off thinking, I'm going to bring this offering outside of the proper place. Now, proper place invalidates the sacrifice. It doesn't make it pigul. So now, by having that intent, you've already invalidated the sacrifice. So therefore, afterwards, nosan bakliva holich vehikter, you put it into a utensil, you carry it to the mizbeach, and you burn it on the mizbeach. Chutz lizmano, outside of the proper time. O shekamatz chutz lizmano, or he does the kmitza, and this time he starts off with pigul intent that he's going to do it outside of the proper time.
It's invalid.
Right, exactly. Nosan bakliva holich vehikter. Now he's going to put it in utensil and he carries it and he burns it. Chutz l'makomo with puzzle intent. O shekamatz, or he does the kmitza nasbekli the holich vehikter chutz l'makomo, or he does all of it with in mind. Now he's not chayav kares. Why? Because zehu shelo karav hamanter k'mitzvaso, he has not done the rest of the sacrifice properly. So this is our distinction. If he does have in mind that it should be eaten outside of the proper time, it turns into pigul. But if I do some other part of the sacrifice to ruin it, that would make it puzzle, as you said. So then it's not pigul, and you're not chayav kares. It just is puzzle.
He's playing games, basically.
Well, he's messing it up, right? He's messing it up. Now, minchas chote. Let's take another offering that we discussed, the sin offering, the mincha of the sin offering, which we said has nothing in it other than flour. So now minchas kno, same thing by.
It doesn't even have water, just flour.
As correct, yes, because we said that we don't want this korban to be nice. It's brought on sad occasions or bad circumstances. Same thing by the sota, right? We're bringing this mincha on the occasion where she's being suspected. Shekamson shalol lishman, if you do kmitza without the right intent. Now we said earlier in the parak that if you already have no intent when you bring these offerings, not that you're having intent to eat it outside or you're having intent to do it outside the right time, you're just thinking, I'm going to bring this korban not as a minchas chote. Okay, now if you do that, you've invalidated the sacrifice just with that intent. So even if you continue on and you do the rest of the service, you put it into a utensil, you carry it and you burn it, chutz lizmano, with the intent of doing pigul, you've already invalidated it, so therefore it can't be pigul. O shekamatz chutz lizmano, if he starts off the offering making it pigul, and he says this is going to be consumed outside the right time, then nosan bekliva holich vehikter shelo shman, but then he says, I'm going to bring this korban, and he has in mind for a different offering. So then, zehu shelo karav hamatir k'mitzvaso, that's another circumstance where the psul was not done, the rest of the offering was not done properly, and therefore, as a result, the leftover bread does not become pigul. Now, another circumstance where it was not brought properly, and therefore it's not pigul, in the sense that you don't get kares, but it is puzzle. Lechol kazayas bachutz, person thinks I'm going to eat a kazayas outside. So immediately, that's the wrong time.
And tomorrow.
So now, right, so he says, first he says lechol kazayas bachutz, and then he says kazayas l'machar, I'm going to eat also another kazayas tomorrow. Kazayas l'machar, he's going to say, I'm going to eat a kazayas of this tomorrow, kazayas bachutz and a kazayas outside. Kachatzi zayis b'chutz, kachatzi zayis l'machar. I'm going to eat half an olive outside and half an olive inside tomorrow. Kachatzi zayis l'machar, half a kazayis tomorrow. He starts off with the intent, and we discussed in Maseches Zvachim. We won't go through that here. Why we are talking about it as a chatzi matir, whether you start off that you're going to do tomorrow and switch to chutz l'makomo or vice versa. Kachatzi zayis b'chutz, puzzle. So in those circumstances, it's puzzle vein kares. It's not kares. Why? Because the invalidating intent of outside the right time is only a psul. And therefore, since you've done that intent also, you've made this korban puzzle, and a puzzle korban can't be pigul. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Zeh hakal. Here's your rule. Im machshevas hazman kadma lemachshevas hamakom. He disagrees. Up until this point, we've had the opinion of the Rabbanan. The opinion of the Rabbanan is, it does not matter which comes first. You started off pigul when you switch to puzzle, then the korban is puzzle. You start off puzzle and you switch to pigul, the korban is puzzle. It can only be pigul if you started off and you stayed the entire time pigul, or you start off pigul and then you were quiet until you did the offering properly the rest of the way. Rabbi Yehuda says not true. He says, here's our rule. If the pigul intent comes first, so then pigul v'chayav of kares, he says, that makes it pigul. Once it's established as pigul, if you have further invalidating intents later, you can't make it not pigul anymore. However, the other way around, if your invalidating intent comes first, you have in mind that you're going to get outside the right place, and that invalidates makes your korban puzzle, and then afterwards you have intent for pigul at a future part of the service, puzzle, that invalidates it, ve'ein bo kares, but you do not get kares in that circumstance. The Chacham disagree with that. And they say, zevazeh, puzzle ve'ein bo kares. It's going to be either way. It's going to be puzzle. There's no kares because the invalidating intent, whether it's first or second, ruins the pigul. Okay, says the Gemara. I boy lahu. So here's our question. The Divrei Omer Shiraim shechasru bein kmitza la'Torah makdir kumetz alehem. We had an argument that we were discussing between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, we had our perfectly ready to go korban mincha, and then the kmitza is done. While the kmitza, after the kmitza is already taken, if part of the leftover, the shirayim, part of the bread becomes missing, so then what happens? According to Reish Lakish, if part of the rest of the korban goes missing, then the kmitza is invalid. You got to throw it away. The rest of the korban's no good. Says Rabbi Yochanan, no, the kmitza is still good. Keep on going and burn your kmitza. The only thing is, you can't now eat the remainder of what's left.
What did it be called? Tashkis though?
No, because it becomes your habit. It's like throwing away non-kosher for something, right? Oh. It's ruined already. It's puzzle, right? So, according to the Divrei Omer Shiraim shechasru bein kmitza la'Torah makdir kumetz alehem, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that the leftovers of if the leftover after the kmitza lost some of it, you can still go ahead and bring that kmitza and burn it. The kaimalon, and we said on that, to oson shirai masur b'achila, now that leftover is now invalid to eat. So now the question is, since it's invalid to eat, can you say that if I go forward with this sacrifice, I'm going to burn the kmitza on the mizbeach? That burning of that kmitza is valid. Would we say then that because you've created a valid sacrifice, the leftovers that were in the container are now pigul, if you had pigul intent? Because as we said in our Mishnah is, if the rest of the offering is valid, then the original pigul intent can get you kares.
The machshavos was for pigul.
That's correct. So he started off, he did his kmitza for the sake of pigul. Now he goes and he brings it and he offers it, even though, now, two ways to look at it, right? Either, right, it's going to be a kosher korban because you've done the kmitza, you've burned the kmitza, and therefore it establishes the remnants as pigul, or the remnants were still prohibited to eat. And in order for something to be pigul, it has to be that everything was brought validly. And this is not, because you are still not able to eat the leftovers. Similarly, the question is also, what happens to the remnants? Normally, when I bring an offering and I burn the kmitza on the mizbeach, what occurs is the remnants become permissible to eat. So me'ilah exists as a prohibition that I'm not allowed to use anything that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. So if I've got this mincha, before I burn the kmitza, if I use the leftovers, that's me'ilah, because I'm not allowed to touch it. But once I burn the kmitza, normally now the kohen is allowed to eat the rest of it. Therefore, there's no prohibition of me'ilah. It becomes permissible. Okay, well, now this leftovers are prohibited because the remnants were missing. The leftovers were missing. So therefore, do we say that me'ilah is gone? Right? Is it that the burning of the kmitza eliminates me'ilah in any circumstance, or does it only eliminate me'ilah because the shirayim, the leftovers, become permitted? And here, since the leftovers are not permitted, there's still a me'ilah. So Amar Rav Huna says, Afilu Rabbi Akiva. So now we are going to mention another machlokas that we have mentioned in the past, a machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar. And this question came up in end of Maseches Zvachim, and we discussed what happens if I take if I slaughter an animal and I take the meat outside of the azara. Now that ruins the korban. and now I take the blood and I do zrika, I throw the blood. Does the throwing of the blood remove the prohibition of me'ilah from this invalid meat? Can't eat the meat. It's yotze. It's already outside of the azara. So that's an argument. Rabbi Akiva says, even Rabbi Akiva, who says zrika mo'elis liyotze, zrika, he says normally, if I take the meat outside of the azara, outside of the Beis Hamikdash, if I throw the blood, me'ilah leaves that meat. Therefore, if I do something like I take this meat and I eat it, so I have not maybe I'm in violation of eating something that's yotze, but I'm not in violation of me'ilah. Well, he says, well, that's different. That might not apply here, because what we're trying to say is, even though the meat is prohibited because it's yotze, because it left the azara, it's still not me'ilah because you've sprinkled the blood. So too, when it comes to this mincha, despite the fact that the mincha is missing some of the bread, and therefore it becomes you can't eat the remnants, the kmitza still is going to validate the offering. That should be the same thing, and it should eliminate the prohibition of me'ilah. So the answer is no, because even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that zrika does remove the me'ilah from the meat that leaves the azar, leaves the Beis Hamikdash area, hani mili yotze de'isi be'enei. That's only a situation of the prohibition of yotze, where the meat leaves the Beis Hamikdash, where the meat is still here. Upaso machmas davar acherhu. The invalidation comes from an external problem with the meat. The meat is fine. The meat is right here. The problem is that you took the meat outside the location of where it belongs. Therefore, we're on Yud Bey's Amud Aleph towards the bottom, right? However, upaso machmas. However, aval chisaron. But if you're actually missing part of the korban mincha, that's why it's invalidated. De psula de gufeu, that is an invalidation in the offering itself. Lo mahani le'aktara. Then maybe Rabbi Akiva would agree that even burning that on the mizbeach is not going to remove the me'ilah. So that's Rav Huna's perspective. Rava says, no, I'll tell you it's exactly the opposite. Amar le Rava. Rava says, aderabba. No, I look at it completely reversed. He says, afilu l'Rebbe Eliezer, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, to Amar, ein zrika mo'eles liyotze, that he holds that zrika is not going to help the meat that got taken out of the azara, meaning that person does his korban, catches the blood, and then the meat gets taken outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and then somebody goes ahead and throws the blood anyway. He says that the meat still has a prohibition of me'ilah, since you can't eat it because it has gone outside of the azara. The prohibition of me'ilah, of getting illegal benefit from something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, has not gone away. He says, "Hani mili biyotze." That's only by the circumstance of yotze delese bifnim, where there is no such right. That's because it's not inside. It's not in the throwing of the blood only is going to help things which are inside of the azara. Aval chisaron, but when we're dealing with a mincha that has the kmitza already taken and part of it is missing, de'ise bifnim, the rest of it is right here. It's right here in the azara. So when you burn the kmitza, the rest of the offering is better. And so therefore, umehanya lehaktara, the burning is going to help it. And therefore the burning is going to remove the prohibition of me'ilah. And also it's going to establish pigul. Okay, so Amar Rava. Rava says, Mina min Allah, I'm going to prove my point. I'm going to prove my point that that basically that the burning of the incense, burning of the kmitza of the offering that has a piece missing is going to remove the prohibition of me'ilah and establish it as pigul. So if you eat it, you're going to be chayav kares for pigul, if that was the intent, if you did the kmitza with the intent of pigul, and you're not going to be in violation of me'ilah. How do I know that? It's not. Look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, if somebody does kmitza on the mincha, and his intent is to eat part of the leftovers of the offering, which is permissible to eat, and he's going to eat it bachutz, outside of the Beis Hamikdash area, kazayas mishira bachutz, or not the whole thing, even a kazayas of it. And as Yehuda said, that's the minimum amount that's considered to be eating. Therefore, as long as you eat a kazayas of it outside, you're also in violation. Vitani Rabbi Chia, Then Rabbi Chia comes along and he has a brisa, which looks almost identical to our Mishnah. And it says, "Hakometzes hamincha," somebody does kmitza, etc. But you know what he doesn't write? Velotani o kazayas. He doesn't say, or if you eat or consume a kazayas. Why doesn't he say that? Right? Isn't it true that if you eat just a kazayas, or if you have in mind that you're going to eat a kazayas outside, doesn't that invalidate it? It's true. So why doesn't he say that? The answer is, Lav kegon shechasru shirayim v'kamalahu kazayas. Is it not because when you say that all he eats is a kazayas, so then it has to include all the cases where somebody might eat a kazayas. One of the cases where you might eat a kazayas is where all of the offering gets lost and all that's left is a kazayas. Well, in that circumstance, if the offering pieces get lost, you can't eat any of it. So therefore, to say that you'd be chayev for a kazayas, for pigul, is not true because the offering is already invalid, right? If it's before kmitza and you lose the offering, it's going to be invalid. So therefore, since he doesn't want to use the word okazayas because there are circumstances where that does not apply. That's not true. Okay, so now the kavon, that we move on to the second part. The second part of the Mishnah talks about where you've now done kmitza and now you do the other parts of the service. You're bringing it close to the mizbeach, you're burning it on the mizbeach. The kavon de b'matan kli, when you put it into the utensil, behiluch u'b'haktar in the second part of the Mishnah, where it's talking about where you put it in the utensil, you bring it to the mizbeach and you burn it, lo masni la okazayas. So there too, he doesn't use the phrase okazayas. Why is that? And he could use it ashirayim, meaning he could have said that even if you eat a kazayas of the leftovers, you'd be chayav for pigul. Because that's really the question that we're having, is why doesn't he say that? Even if you eat a kazayas of the leftovers, you'd be chayav for pigul. So the reason is not because it's not true. It's because b'kmitza nami lechol shirayim lotani o kazayas. He can't say that if you eat or consume a kazayas of the kmitza, then you'd be chayev, because it's not true. Because if you're missing any of the kmitza, then it's going to invalidate the offering, in which case you wouldn't be liable for pigul. Therefore, ktani seifa, pigul v'chayovin of kores, alma mehanyalahu. So therefore, why doesn't he? So even though he doesn't use the word okazayas, he agrees with the sentiment of the Mishnah. And that is that if you would eat any of the leftovers of this offering, then you'd be chayav pigul for eating a kazayas of it. And therefore that proves Rava's point. Rava says that as long as you eat a kazayas of it, you are invalid, you are eating pigul, even though part of the mincha is missing. The rest of it, all you had left was a kazayas. That means the rest of it's missing. Once you eat a kazayas of it, you are chayav for pigul. Therefore, he says this brisa proves my point.
The punishment is kars, right?
And the punishment would be kares. Amar le Abaye, so Abaye says, no, your brisa is not a proof. Right? Brisa is not a proof. Because he says, money, whose opinion is this? This is Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Ditnan, we learn in a Mishnah. Ha-kometz v'halavona v'aktoras u'minchas kohanim. When it comes to the lavona, the frankincense of the korban mincha, the ktores, the spices that are brought every day in the Beis HaMikdash, u'minchas kohanim, and the korban mincha of the kohanim, which kohanim who donate a korban mincha don't eat any of their korban. Uminchas kohen Mashiach, also the special korban that the kohen gadol brings every day, also gets burned completely and does not get eaten. Uminchas nesachim, also the korban mincha that comes together with an animal sacrifice, all of it gets burned, none of it gets consumed either. Shehikrif me'achas mehen kazayas b'chutz, if you burn from some of this korban outside of the Beis HaMikdash, a kazayas of it, you are chayev. Because you are not allowed, considered once you burn a kazayas, that's considered a sizable amount. And we learned in Mesachas Zvachim that burning bachutz, haktaras bachutz, is a prohibition in the Torah that you are chayev for. Rabbi Elazar poter. Rabbi Elazar said, no, you're exempt. Why? Ad sheyakriv es kulo. It's all or nothing, right? If you have to burn a whole thing and you burn one kazayas of it, that would not be that would not be sufficient to make you to make a successful korban. Therefore, it's also not sufficient to make you liable for burning outside. So, kevan dalaktar's kamitza lomas nile. Now, when it comes to by burning the kamitza, it doesn't say this. It's not listed. The kamitza is not listed here. So, o kazayas mikumtza bachutz beshirayim nami lomas nile o kazayas. So therefore, right, what he's having in mind to eat the shirayim also, right, doesn't say o kazayas either. So, because it's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Because if I had in mind that I'm going to eat a kazayas outside, that would be meaningless. Because eating kazayas is not enough. Therefore, since it's telling me that burning the kamitza outside burning kazayas is not sufficient, therefore it also wants to say even eating kazayas of it is also not sufficient. Therefore, this brisa is not agreeing with our Mishnah. This brisa is not telling us that the rule is that if you would eat it, you would be chayv pigel. It's telling you that also, right, we are not going to consider it to be pigel because it's not a valid, sufficient eating consumption. One kazayas is not enough, according to Rabbi Elazar. It's got to be the whole thing. Well, asks the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar, if it's Rabbi Elazar's opinion, Hai lahaktir kumtza, why does it say there that if you come to burn the komets, right? Shouldn't be correct. Laktir kumtza ulevonasami boile. That doesn't seem correct because you wouldn't be in violation if you burned the kamitza. You'd only, according to Rabbi Elazar, you have to burn everything that you're supposed to burn. Well, there's two things you have to burn. You have to burn the kamitza plus the frankincense. If you only do one, not the other, you're not liable yet. Ditznan, as we learned in a Mishnah, as hakomitz v'halavona shehikrev es echad bahen bachutz. If we're going to see this, we did this in Maseches Zvachim. If you did the kamitza and the lavona, and then you brought one of them outside, then you are liable. But Rabbi Elazar poter, Rabbi Elazar says, no, not so. Ad shehi yakriv v'shem, you have to bring both. It's all or nothing. So bringing just the kamitza is only part of the service. So the answer is, lo nitzrecha el lekomitz de minchas chote. You're right. That's a good point. But there is a korban that if you just bring the kamitza without any lavona, that you would be liable, according to Rabbi Elazar, and that is the minchas chote. Why? Because the minchas chote has no lavona, it has no frankincense. So therefore you are liable if all you burn is the kamitza. The ichbol tana lashmin and kometz de minchas chote. You're telling me they learned this entire brisa just to give me the one case? And the answer is yeah, why not? Sure, that's it. Just tell me that one thing. V'chein ki also Reb Dimi, even when Reb Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, Amar, he said, Rabbi Elazar says, kometz de minchas chotehu v'Rabbi Elazar. This brisa is talking about the kamitza of the minchas chote. That means you have to do the entire kamitza in order to be liable, and that's because it's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, and it's Rabbi Elazar's opinion, and it's the minchas chote. That's why he doesn't mention the lavona. Okay, so now that Abaye pointed that out, Hadar Amar Rava. Rava changes his mind. Milsahi Amri. He says, Lav Milsahi Amri. That which I said is incorrect. Right? Fair point. I'm not correct. The Tanya, as we learn in a brisa, Kodesh Kodashim. The pasuk talking about lechem apanim says that it is the holy of holies offering. Now, She'im Nifrasa Achas Mechaloseha. Why does it tell me that? That if one of the loaves of the lechem apanim got split into two, so then kulan psulos, the entire offering is invalid. Why? Because it's missing, right? It's missing a piece. So therefore, even if it's not whole, it's considered to be missing a piece. Right? Why is that considered missing a piece? Fair question. We shouldn't deal with the issue. Some feel that it's impossible that if the lechem apanim broke, some crumbs didn't fall away. Some feel that really the problem is that you're supposed to have 12 loaves, now that you have 13, it's some kind of invalidation as well. But in any event, the Gemara says, and we have assumed this in the past, that once it breaks, that ruins, that's considered to be missing and it's no good. So, ha yotzos, so that is to explain, right? What if one of them is not missing anything? What if one of them just goes outside of the Azara? Somebody runs away with one of the loaves. Okay. Now, and then you take the spoons and you burn them on the mezbeach. Hani deika gavai ksheros. The rest of them are fine because it's not missing. So therefore, uman shmaslei de'amar zrika mo'elas liyotze. Who's the opinion, as we said, that holds that the zrika, the burning of these, and in this case, it's the haktara, burning of the bazichin of the of the spices of the spoons are going to help permit the bread that leaves the azara. That's Rabbi Akiva. That's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. The kamar nifra salo, and there it says that if it breaks, if you're missing, it's no good. So therefore, it clearly states, not like Rabbi had suggested. Rabbi Akiva would agree that if the mincha was, despite the fact that he holds that it's like Rav Huna said originally, despite the fact that he holds that meat that leaves the azara can be taken care of by the sprinkling of the blood inside the azara, he holds that that missing a piece of the korban is worse. Missing a piece of the mincha is worse because it's actually invalidation in the body of the offering itself. Therefore, burning the kemitza is not going to validate it. Amar le Abaye. So Abaye says, I can answer that question though. He says, ha miktani ha yatzas, right? He says, it doesn't really say that in the Mishnah, right? If it goes out, the rest would be kosher, right? That's your implication. You're saying, why did it take bread? If it broke, then it's invalid. And you said, well, okay, that means if it left, it would be fine. Not necessarily. V'dilma ha nitmeis kasheres. Maybe the reason why it's saying if it breaks, it's invalid is because if it became tameh, it would still be okay. If it left the azara, it might not be okay. So hanach kasheres, that would be where it's kosher. My taima, why would being tameh be better off? The answer is because demaratz tzitz. Remember, we have the coin wearing the tzitz. The tzitz helps whenever something is tameh. So therefore, the head plate, right? It says kodesh l'Hashem.
If something was shine, right? If something was shine or something like that, no?
No, it was gold. It was gold. It was shiny. But yeah.
So even though you have 11.
Yes. Even though you have 11, it's not chaser because the other loaf exists. It didn't disappear. So it doesn't exist. It's tameh. That's exactly right. So I can't call it chaser. So it's not going to be invalid because of chaser. It's not invalid because of tameh because of the tzitz. According to Rabbi Akiva, it might not even be tameh because of yotze. That's what we tried to say, but we're trying not to say that now. Aval yotzas, if it would leave the azara, that would be an invalidation low. Rabbi Eliezer here, and this would be Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, to Amar Ein Zrika Moelos L'Yotze, where Rabbi Eliezer says that if the meat left the azara, and then you sprinkle the blood of that sacrifice anyway, that's not going to help the meat that left. That meat that left is still has a problem of me'ilah. Ubedinhu diboy lemisnei nami yotos. And really, this brisa should have not only talked about if the lechem apanim broke, could have also talked about if the lechem apanim left the azara. V'hayde nifrasa. Why does it talk about a broken piece? Hakamashmon is coming to tell me dafilo nifrasa deise bifnim, that even though it broke and it is inside the azara still, nevertheless, lo mahanyule haktara. That burning is not going to help it because it's missing a piece. That's it. There's nothing you can do. Now, Rabbi Akiva, Damar Zrika Moelos L'Yotze, and according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that sprinkling of the blood is going to help when the meat of the animal gets left out. Afilu chisoron nami mahanyule haktara. He would say that even if it's missing a piece, burning the incense on the mizbeach is going to help permit from me'ilah it's going to permit from me'ilah the rest of the offering. So even though you can't eat it because it's missing, but if you do eat it, you're not chayav me'ilah. Okay, so that's a place to stop at the Mishnah.
Yes.